ടൈം പീസിനടുത്ത് വെച്ചാൽ ആ ടൈം പീസിൻ്റെ അടുത്ത്
ക്യാമറ ഓണല്ലേ 6:57 ക്യാമറ മാറട്ടെ.
വിജയ് നാളെ റെഡി തന്നെ.
റെഡി വരും. ഒരു 3 മിനിറ്റ് കഴിയുമ്പോൾ 7 മണിയാവും. 6:57 ആയിട്ട്.
ഗുരുർബ്രഹ്മാ ഗുരുർവിഷ്ണു ഗുരുർദേവോ മഹേശ്വരഃ ഗുരുഃ സാക്ഷാത് പരം ബ്രഹ്മ തസ്മൈ ശ്രീ ഗുരവേ നമഃ. ഓം ശാന്തി ശാന്തി ശാന്തി. Dear friends, this is part of the seminar series conducted by Narayana Gurukula as part of the Brahma Vidya seminars we conduct 3 times a year. Narayana Gurukula is a fraternity of wisdom seekers. What is wisdom? Wisdom is to be differentiated from knowledge. When we say knowledge, it is about something. When I say I have knowledge about something, it means I am a knower, and what I know about is the object or the known. Then I am the subject. In the case of knowledge, there is the difference between the subject and object, or the knower and the known. But the case of wisdom is not like that. There, the difference between object and subject and object vanish. How is it? Actually, what is the problem wisdom deals with? There are two problems. One is, who am I? The other is, from where did this world originate? Who am I actually? I am an integral part of this universe, of this world. My existence is as part of the world. One thing we have to notice in advance is that my own existence is very certain for me, undeniable for me. And my existence is as part of this world. I don't have any, even one step to stand on other than as part of this world. I don't have any existence apart from this world. My own existence and the existence of the world I and the world are one reality. So what is real in me should be what is real in the world also, or what is real in the world is what is real in me also. So in order to know what is real in this world, what I have to do is to know myself. That is the easiest and straight way in which I can know the origin of this world, or the essential content of this world. It is just like knowing what is the essential content of the ocean by taking a drop of water in it and knowing what is real in it. I am an individual in the place of a drop of water, and the universe is in the place of this ocean. So who am I? If you go through the works of Narayana Guru, I don't go into all the details. I don't have enough time. If you go through the works of Narayana Guru, you will find that Narayana Guru demonstrates very clearly that consciousness or arivu is the one essential content in my being. And then what should be the essential content in the entire world? The same consciousness, the same arivu is the essential content of this world also. So the answer to the question, who am I? It is, I am arivu, or I am pure and unconditioned consciousness, which is called Chit in Vedanta. And From where did this world originate? It is from the very same Chit that the world originated.
Oh,
The world originated from the very same Chit. What is this Chit in my own being? It is the essential content of my being. That means what is it is that Chit is the essential content of my being. That means it is the real existence in me. What is ultimately existing either in my being or in the being of the world. That Chit, it is Sat also. In the sense that reality, that Chit reality is what exists in my being as well as in the being of the world. Then it is called Sat. That means Sat itself, Chit itself is the Sat. In that sense, the Chit is sometimes called Chit Vastu. Chit Vastu means the substance called Chit or pure and unconditioned consciousness. So when I know myself as Chit, who is the knower of that understanding? It is myself. What is known then? It is the essential content of me, my own being. It is myself that is being known. So in the context of wisdom of I knowing myself, that is called self-knowledge. I knowing myself is called self-knowledge or Atma-jnana. The science that deals with that Atma-jnana is called Atma-vidya. So, what is or who is the subject in the context of Atma-vidya? It is myself. What is the object known in the context of Atma-vidya? It is myself. So the subject becomes the object and the object becomes the subject. That is the difference between ordinary knowledge and wisdom. The wisdom of self-knowledge is in which the subject becomes the object and object becomes the subject. So that when I know myself as Sat, and also what is that Sat? I know myself as Sat, that means really existing. And what is the substance of what really exists? That is pure and unconditioned consciousness, Chit. That means Chit is the Sat and Sat is the Chit. By knowing this, what did we gain? A clear understanding about myself. That was what I was searching for. Oh, what I was searching for is now I have found out. What do you feel when you feel that what you have been searching for is just found out? Then you feel a sort of contentment within, an ananda within. Where does this ananda arise from? Oh, it is arises from nowhere other than from from within myself. So does it mean that happiness was existing already within me without my knowledge? Yes. That Ananda content was existing in me, but I was not aware of it. So the Ananda content that was already aware within me becomes evident to me at this moment. So Ananda content was within me. Who am I? That is Chit. So that within that Chit itself was existing the Ananda content. That means Chit, the Ananda is not something that we get from somewhere else. It is an essential content of my own being. Just as my own essential content is Chit and Sat at the same time, it is Ananda also at the same time. That is why the self-content or that very same self-content itself is the reality that exists in the being of the entire world. Whether it is seen as existing in the entire world or in me, it is Sat in essential content, Chit in essential content. Also, it is Ananda in essential content. That is why it is defined as Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Put together, it makes Satchidananda. So the Atma reality in me, the overall reality in the entire world, then we Atma in my own being, or I call it Brahman that exists in the entire world system, cosmic system. It is Sat, Chit, and Ananda at the same time. Is this Ananda? So that the one point that you have to keep in mind is that this Ananda is not derived from somewhere. On attaining wisdom, the wisdom we mean in the context of spirituality, Ananda is that Satchidananda is my own essential content, and that the Ananda content in it or the Ananda part of it is not to be seen as coming from somewhere else. That arises from my own being. How should I perceive it? Is it an experience of happiness without any kind of suffering in our life? No. So happiness and suffering, pleasure and pain, both are possible, both are natural in human life. Not only in human life, in the life of all living beings. But human beings alone are in search of this reality. It is the Ananda content in me, in all of us, that manifests as our suffering in a negative way and as our happiness in a positive way. That means, to make it more clear, the whole Ananda content in our own being becomes manifest as our sufferings and also as our happinesses. So The Ananda as it is understood in Vedanta, as in the context of wisdom, is neither pleasure nor pain. It is the one neutral reality that becomes unfolded on the one side as pain and on the other side as pleasure. So, the Ananda in Vedanta is to be seen as something neutral between pleasure and pain. So, it is not derived from something else. So, this Ananda is not something derived from wisdom. When you gain wisdom, you realize yourself as Sat, Chit and Ananda, and thus Ananda becomes your own. You realize that Ananda itself is your own essential content, just as you are consciousness in essential content, you are Ananda also in essential content. So in this sense, you can say you do not derive Ananda from wisdom. Your wisdom itself results as your Ananda. Or you cannot differentiate gaining wisdom and gaining Ananda. Gaining wisdom itself is gaining Ananda. Gaining Ananda means you have gained wisdom. Another point I have to make clear in this short discourse is about the origin of the world. The other day, someone asked me whether the life principle, the life originated after the origin of matter, or both originated simultaneously. There is no question like this. What we call matter, according to Vedanta, is simply a manifest form of this Satchit Ananda. What we call life is another manifest form of the same Satchit Ananda. So there is no question of one being derived from the other. There is no difference between Sat and Chit, matter and mind, or matter and life. Narayana Guru, in the Atmopadesha Shatakam, in one verse, he says, Podiyoru bhovil asankham apodikul padumaru bhovidinilla bhinna bhavam. Jadam amarunadu vola chittilum. Jadam amarunadu, just as innumerable dust particles are in the being of this earth. How do you say whether earth contains innumerable particles or the earth exists in the innumerable particles? Both are correct. To say that the earth exists in particles and that particles exist in the earth, both are correct. In the same way, you can say that the matter exists in mind and mind exists in matter. These two are not two realities. One and the same reality appears on the one side as matter and on the other side as mind, as our life principle. We cannot differentiate the life principle from matter or from Chit from Jada. Matter, the equivalent to matter and mind in Sanskrit is Chit and Jada. Jada are the inert matter that is a manifest form of the own consciousness reality. What is life principle or the jiva, the soul, what you call mind, that is another manifest form of the same consciousness reality or of the same Sat Chit Ananda. So there is no question of whether life originated from matter or when did life originate from matter. All these questions do not arise in Vedanta. Such questions arise only because we think in terms of modern physics, where it is always thought that physical matter is the origin of everything, and it is everything. Even if there is a mind, that is also originated from matter. Is it proved or not? No, it is not proved and provable. It is not provable either, but we think so. But there is no such question in Vedanta. Life and matter, or matter and mind, they are just two manifest forms of one and the same reality, that is Sat Chit Ananda. These are the basic things I wanted to make clear in this discourse today. Is there anything more to be cleared, Vijay? Hello, Vijay.
കേൾക്കാൻ വരും.
Is there any more point to be cleared?
I think everything is clear, Guru. It's very clear. That's very interesting. You can continue for another 6 more minutes.
You can raise another point.
Yeah,
Then
is there anyone would like to raise a point? You can unmute the mic and request for a point. Yeah. I think the Ananda content itself could be explained in detail for another 6 more minutes. Guru is, Guru, it is mute. The mic is off. Yes, okay.
Okay. As I made it clear, Ananda is not pleasure. It is the neutral point between pleasure and pain, happiness and suffering. And that is not something derived from something outside. It is something that is part of our own being. It is not, it doesn't come from outside. And where does this wisdom arise from? That also arises from ourselves, from within ourselves. So arising of wisdom and arising of happiness, these cannot be differentiated. So I think there was a question how Ananda is derived from wisdom. No, it is not derived from wisdom. Wisdom itself is Ananda. Wisdom, when we experience it, it becomes Ananda. Experientially, it is Ananda. Understandably, it is wisdom. But that wisdom is something to be understood as well. Wisdom also is an experience in which subject becomes the object and object becomes the subject. What else? The dearest of all for each one of us is our own self. Why it is dearest? I am the dearest for myself. Something dearest gives us happiness also. So, the dearest reality in me is the reality that makes me happiest also. Narayana Guru, when he concludes the Atmopadesha Shatakam, he summarizes all these together when he says, Atum itum alla sadardhamalla aham sat chit amardam ennu തെളിഞ്ഞ് ധീരനായി സത് അസത് ഇതി പ്രതിപത്തിയറ്റ് സത് ഓം ഇതി മൃദുവായി അമർന്നിടയണം. Who am I? I cannot say that I am that or this. Adum idum alla. Sadardhamalla. Or then what is it? Is it the essential content of what exists? Theoretically, when we can say it is so, but experientially we cannot say that it is the essential content of what exists. Adum idum alla. Sadardhamalla. Then who am I? Satchit amardam ennu തെളിഞ്ഞ്. I become fully aware that I am Sat, I am Chit, I am Amarta. Amarta stands for Ananda, and when we say it is Amarta, it is more valuable because Amarta means the immortal elixir. That immortality and the sweetness of elixir, all this is contained in the word Amarta. That is more than Ananda. Satchit Amardam ennu തെളിഞ്ഞ്. I get the clarity of that, of I am Satchit Amardam then ennu തെളിഞ്ഞ് ധീരനായി. Then I get a boldness in my life, that which I do not get from any kind of knowledge. ധീരനായി സത് asat iti പ്രതിപത്തിയറ്റ്, without having any preference for existence or non-existence. Sat asat iti pratipatiyat. Then what will be my state? Sat om iti. I am that Sat, that ultimate reality signified by the Om, the sound Om. Iti മൃദുവായി അമർന്നിടയണം. Without we may think it is a kind of knowledge. No, it is not a kind of knowledge. It is an experience in which I slowly become merged in the being of Sat Om. That is all. That is how Narayana Guru concludes his Atmopadesha Shatakam. It's over now. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi.
Greetings to everyone. Welcome to the second day of the Gurukula October webinar series. Yesterday, we had a couple of interesting Malayalam webinars on various chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. Furthermore, all of today's webinars will be delivered in English. Dr. Sabu is the moderator for today's webinar. Dr. Sabu does not require any introduction to the Gurukula circle because he has been learning and teaching the Narayana Gurukula literature for over 25 years. So now we will move on to today's webinars. Dr. Sabu will go over to the topics and presenters in greater detail in a moment. So I hand over the mic to Dr. Sabu, who will run the session until 9 p.m. this evening. So with immense pleasure, I welcome Dr. Sabu.
Pranam to the Guru. Namaste. Good evening. Will Guru be speaking at the end? Bijoy's?
Yes.
Bijoy's?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, I can.
Bijoy's.
Yes, I can hear you.
Guru അവസാനം സംസാരിക്കുന്നുണ്ടോ?
ഗുരു സംസാരിക്കുന്നുണ്ടോന്ന് അറിയില്ല, ഞാൻ ചോദിച്ചില്ല.
ടൈം ഉണ്ടാവില്ല അല്ലേ?
ഇല്ലായിരിക്കും, ഇനി വരുന്നുണ്ട് ഗുരു.
ഞാനിവിടെ ഉണ്ട്.
ഓക്കെ.
നിങ്ങൾ അവസാനം എന്തെങ്കിലും സംസാരിക്കാം, എന്തെങ്കിലും പോയിന്റ് ക്ലിയർ ചെയ്യാനുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അവസാനം ക്ലിയർ ചെയ്യാം.
ശരി 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 ശരി. So we are entering into the second day of the webinar series of Narayana Gurukulam. Guru has already explained about the nature of Narayana Gurukulam and also gave an introduction about the subtle aspects of the topic which have been selected for today's presentation. Narayana Gurukulam is basically an educational institution. In one way, we can say that it is providing education of an informal or a non-formal nature, of a complementary or supplementary to what is given in the formal education system. What is lacking in formal education system, that's about ourselves, as Guru explained, wisdom. That is the nature of Narayana Gurukulam. And the founder himself was a very highly qualified educational expert who had his doctoral degree from University of Paris in 1932 from Sorbonne. And also he was a member of Royal Society of Teachers of London. So he is the founder of Narayana Gurukulam, disciple of Narayana Guru, P. Nadarajan, who later became Dr. Nadarajan and finally Narayana Guru. So today we have 3 topics for our discussions. 2 papers are having the same content. That is the number 1 is what role does wisdom play in attaining happiness in life, to be presented by Mrs. Anju Dilesh. Paper 2 is what gives human life meaning, will be presented by Mrs. Selina Sadashivan. And the third paper is the autobiography of the founder of Narayana Gurukulam, Nadaraja Guru. The title of the paper is An Introduction to Nadaraja Guru's Autobiography, Autobiography of an Absolutist. The presenter is Mr. Sanal Madhav. The first 2 papers are almost, we can say, there are certain complementary nature in these 2 papers. Because one is dealing with happiness, the other is meaning of life, almost same. Also, there can be of compensatory nature, a bit of overlapping also may be there. The third paper is slightly different in its content, but that also contains wisdom. As Guru said, wisdom and happiness are not separate, not different. Those who attain wisdom are attaining happiness also. That's the nature of the 3 papers. So we have Anju Dilesh, who will join us from Rani in Kerala. The other presenters, Mr. Selina Sadashivan and Mr. Sanal Madhav, will be joining from London, both. And I think we can have about 20 minutes for presentation as well as a brief discussion. I think that will be sufficient. And we are dealing with happiness and meaning of life. Obviously, there will be some reference to the great philosopher who thought about these 2 subjects, Socrates. So let us begin by quoting Socrates. He once said, superior minds discuss ideas, mediocre minds discuss events, and inferior minds discuss people. So we are discussing ideas, not about events or people. Happiness and meaning of life are all great ideas. On behalf Anju Dilesh to present the first paper. What role does wisdom play in attaining happiness in life? Anju Dilesh is basically an English teacher. She is from Rani. Is also part of the study program of Narayana Curriculum. She already had presented many papers related to wisdom and also specifically to the Guru tradition of Narayana Gurukulam. And I had the opportunity to be with her for a couple of seminars also. So I invite Anju Dilesh to present her paper. Anju, please.
Thank you, sir. Now I will share the screen with you. Can you see this?
Yes,
Hello.
we can
Yes.
see that screen.
It's visible. It's visible. Visible and audible both.
Okay, thank you, sir. Pranam to Guru. Namaste all. I am very happy to be a part of this webinar. On this auspicious occasion, I remember the blessings of Guru and support of all of you. I would like to thank you for giving me an opportunity to present this paper titled What Role Does Wisdom Play in Attaining Happiness in Life? All of us want to attain happiness in life. We believe that satisfaction of our desires and appetites make us happy. Getting a dream job, attaining sound financial status, having a healthy lifestyle, avoiding pain and stress, maintaining good relationships, etc. are seen to be the factors that make us happy. But just imagine we attain all these things in our life. Will we become happy then? The answer is no. We always have a feeling that there is something more to be attained. Although we are searching happiness, we never think about the real nature of happiness. The concept of happiness is a mystery for us. Nowadays, the question, what is happiness, is asked by not only philosophers but also psychologists, economists, and even neuroscientists. Now, the definition of happiness. The term happiness can be defined as an emotional state characterized by feelings of joy, satisfaction, contentment, and fulfillment. It is analyzed only on the physical level in the West. But our great gurus in the East had a clear vision about happiness. The concept of happiness is well defined in the Upanishads. Narayana Guru also clearly defines happiness as the inseparable essence of our being. In verse 9 of Abhavada Darshanam, Guru says, Ananda alone exists and Ananda alone manifests. Nothing else is there existing at all. The entire world, therefore, is purely Ananda in essence. Nothing other than Ananda has real existence. Now, let us see what is the notion of happiness in the West. Plato and Aristotle believed that happiness is an all-encompassing feature of our lives. We do everything to attain happiness. Plato frames his view of happiness in terms of psychic harmony. We may have a tendency to prioritize our appetites and desires above other considerations. We may break a friend's trust to satisfy our own ambitions, or we may break the law to pursue a desire. In such cases, there arise conflicts. Plato encourages us to consider these conflicts. According to Plato, we become happy by knowing and respecting our natures and allowing our rationality to bring our spirited and appetitive sides into balance. Aristotle called happiness eudaimonia. He believed that happiness is the highest good for human beings. Human beings are distinguished by the capacity to use reason in the best possible way to develop and exercise virtues appropriate to the situation. One's development and exercise of virtue allow him or her to flourish as a human being. Happiness for Epicurus consists in a life of pleasure. This is a view of hedonism. Hedonism is a theory that pleasure is the highest good and proper aim of human life. Epicurus takes pleasure to consist in the absence of pain. Since pleasure is the absence of pain, the key to happiness is to eliminate sources of pain. We do this by learning as much as we can about the things that give us fear, anxiety, and frustration, and by using this knowledge to moderate our emotional reactions. Philosophical discussion of happiness takes an important turn with the works of British philosophers Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. They followed Epicurus, differentiated by their specific analysis of pleasure. They highlight the social and ethical importance of happiness. They recognize that happiness isn't just something we should think about and pursue for ourselves. It's important to each of us entails that we should prioritize happiness of all. Now, let us see what is the concept of happiness in the East. Happiness is frequently discussed in the East and it finds its historical roots within Vedanta philosophy, Buddhism, and Confucianism. These philosophies are deeply informed by metaphysical or transcendental views. Western philosophers historically have tended to think about happiness in terms of the development of oneself as it is located within the physical world. But Eastern philosophers tend to advocate releasing one's self from one's individuality. Indian philosophy holds that focusing on the physical body interferes with one's capacity to identify one's non-material self, described as Atman. Here, happiness is described in terms of bliss or Ananda. Attaining happiness depends on freeing the eternal self from the physical self to develop a higher form of consciousness that sees one's eternal self as united with the universal spirit. Buddhism also emphasizes on the spiritual aspect of the self. The physical body gives rise to cravings and aversions that interfere with our capacity to attain enlightenment. We seek physical pleasures and generate more cravings and aversions. Thus, we focus too heavily on the fleeting and impermanent things happening in this world. But we can learn not to react to cravings and aversions, and gradually we can come to distance ourselves from bodily needs. This allows us to realize the truth and learn that all aspects of the phenomenal world are impermanent and subject to change. Confucianism focuses heavily on understanding the social roles each of us occupy and emphasizes the importance of the rituals surrounding these social roles. Now we can see what is the role of wisdom in attaining happiness. In the Upanishads, as well as in the compositions of Narayana Guru, happiness or Ananda is not simply pleasure understood in the worldly sense. A seeker of truth must realize the fact that everything indeed is Satchidananda alone. The seeker who realizes that Satchidananda alone appears as all these interlinked phenomenal entities awakens to the fact that he or she, one among such interlinked phenomenal forms, is simply that one reality in essence. Here, happiness or Ananda is not just an emotional state to be attained. It is inherent in our own being. Narayana Guru, in his Garland of Visions, clearly explains what is happiness and how we can attain it. Here, the Guru sees sufferings not as a part of life, but they are caused by perceiving reality as many. Happiness does not depend upon any external factors, but on how we perceive the world. Guru says, as knowledge of oneself shrinks, so nescience or avidya becomes prevalent. It assumes names and forms in a most terrible fashion, looms here ghost-like. And this world, non-existent on its own, is terrible like an infernal city. Such is the way the all-pervading Lord Viphu mysteriously did make appear from himself the whole of the universe. All sufferings, including that of death, simply vanish on realizing that one Satchidananda alone assumes the emerging and merging forms of multiple worldly entities, including human beings. Another misconception discussed here is that people simply treat happiness as a goal to be attained. Seekers treat it as an end to be reached through their intense and proper discipline. But what they really attain is a new revelation. A revelation that really the supreme happiness is not a goal to be reached, but is the essential content of the seeker's own being. The goal attained is not something different from one's own being. The attainment merely consists of the removal of a veil that was hiding from one's real nature, the happiness content of one's own existence. Now, let us see how one feels happy when having something. We have an emotional attachment with what makes us happy. When we like something, we feel that it gives us happiness. But the reality is that happiness remains dormant in us. The object we like becomes only an instrument that helps arouse that latent happiness. The origin of happiness is nowhere else than the self or Atma, the one ultimate reality both in me and the object I like. Narayana Guru says in verse 7 of Bhakti Darshanam, what a wife lovingly meditates on is not simply her husband. What a husband lovingly meditates on is not simply his wife. It is self-happiness alone that each one meditates on as inherent in the object concerned. This secret aspect of wisdom is said by the saint Yajnavalkya to his disciple and wife Maitreyi in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad as follows. Verily, not for the sake of the husband is the husband dear, but for the sake of the self is the husband dear. Verily, not for the sake of the wife is the wife dear, but for the sake of the self is the wife dear. The origin of happiness is nowhere else than the self or Atma. Meditatively searching for this Atma is counted by Shankara as Bhakti. Narayana Guru in Bhakti Darshanam gives a more philosophical perfection to the notion of Bhakti in pursuance of Brahma Vidya. The Guru says, Brahman is always searched for meditatively because Brahman is Ananda in essence. Constant meditative search for Brahman is therefore known as Bhakti. This constant effort is called Atmanusandhana, that is, meditative search for what is real in one's own being. It is in essence is none other than Brahmanusandhana, that is, the meditative search for Brahman or the Absolute. The Absolute Reality individuated is understood as Atman and universally as Brahman, both being Ananda in essence. Now, let me conclude this paper. There is a common misconception that happiness is an emotional state caused by various external factors. We live in a materialistic society and value money and other goods in order to become happy. thinking that life is full of sufferings. But an enlightened person sees one Ananda content both in pleasurable and painful experience. He or she can engage in worldly activities as everyone else, but they hold a neutral position which is transcendental in nature. Attaining wisdom helps a person to experience real happiness which is inherent in him. Such a seeker of wisdom does not need to depend external factors to attain happiness. For this paper, I mainly referred to books. One is The Garland of Visions by Guru Muninarayana Prasad. Second one, The Philosophy of Happiness and Interdisciplinary Introduction by Lorraine L. Besser. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anju.
Thank you, sir.
So Anju started with a definition of happiness. She made a comparison of various approaches of happiness and what's the difference between East and West. And probably the crux or the key point of her paper is that from the point of view of wisdom, happiness is not based on external objects. It is inherent in our being. And that must be the core part of her paper, the role of wisdom in finding happiness. So now it is open for a brief discussion. We can have some quick questions before moving to the next paper. Please, you may unmute your mic and ask questions. Or even we can make brief comments, but not, now papers are allowed, only brief comments, please.
Hi, Dr. Sabu. This is Subhash from London. Namaskaram.
Hi, sir.
Hi, how are you? I have one question. It's a simple question. There was a definition of happiness from two angles. One was to look at happiness in the conventional sense, everyday happiness, happiness that we enjoy through the five senses, etc., etc. And then the author, Madam, looked at happiness from the perspective of Eastern philosophy, as well as Sri Narayana Guru. Sri Narayana Guru's ultimate definition from an inner perspective. I was wondering whether she could elaborate on that second definition, on what happiness is. Just a clear definition of what exactly is that happiness. Is it called happiness? Is it called Ananda? I just wanted a bit more elaborate explanation of what that is. It Arivu? Sri Narayana Guru's Arivu, is it the same thing? Just a small elaboration.
Anju, is it clear? Anju?
Yes, sir.
Is it clear?
Yes, the question is clear. Here, when we have wisdom, we can experience happiness as Ananda. In the Western perspective, happiness, or in our own perspective, everyday use, happiness is only an emotional state. But in the view of Narayana Guru, it is Ananda. That Ananda means the ultimate Ananda, Satchidananda. That if we have wisdom, we can experience the real Ananda, not happiness. It is not an emotional state here. It is bliss.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Anjumol, for that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for the question. Is it clear?
Yeah, it's very clear. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Back to you, Doctor. Back to
That
you,
point
Doctor.
was actually clarified by Guru himself in the beginning by way of introduction. That pleasure and pain, everyday pleasure and pain are different from what we speak about happiness or ananda in philosophy. There's actually a norm or measuring rod to measure pain and pleasure inherent in us, which is different from the pain and pleasure that we experience on a daily basis. So, any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hello, sir. Rejoice.
Yes.
Ms. Anju, you said, actually you quoted, it is not for the sake of the others that they are dear to us, but it is for the sake of the self that they are dear. And, it's not a personal question, but that goes like a personal one, but don't misunderstand. You have a child of 3 or 4. I've seen that. I understand that. How do you make her understand, at least when she grows older, that it is not for the sake of her that you loved her, but it is for the sake of yourself that you've been loving her? Will she be happy listening to it?
I think when she grow old, I can make her understand that the happiness, it is self happiness is the ultimate happiness, because we know that when ഇപ്പൊ സാധാരണ ഞാൻ മലയാളത്തിൽ പറഞ്ഞോട്ടെ. ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ നമ്മള് സാധാരണയായിട്ട് ഇപ്പൊ സെൽഫ് ഹാപ്പിനെസ് ആണ് അൾട്ടിമേറ്റ് ഹാപ്പിനെസ് എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ പിന്നെ അപ്പൊ അവിടെ നമ്മൾ മറ്റൊന്നിനും വേണ്ടിയല്ല മറ്റുള്ളവരെ സ്നേഹിക്കുന്നത് എന്നുള്ള ഒരു ആ ഒരു അറിവ് നമുക്ക് കുട്ടിക്ക് പകർന്നു കൊടുക്കാനായിട്ട് കഴിയുമെന്നാണ് ഞാൻ വിചാരിക്കുന്നത്. കാരണം മറ്റൊരാൾ ഒരിക്കലും നമ്മളെ ഇപ്പൊ നമ്മളോളം നമ്മളെ സ്നേഹിക്കുന്ന മറ്റാരും ഇല്ല എന്നുള്ള കാര്യം നമ്മൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കി കൊടുക്കുക. അപ്പം നമ്മൾ എന്താണ്, നമ്മളിൽ തന്നെ പൂർണ്ണമായിട്ട് വിശ്വസിക്കുക, നമ്മളിലുള്ള കഴിവുകളെ വളർത്തിയെടുക്കുക, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മറ്റൊരാൾക്ക് വേണ്ടി നമ്മളുടെ സന്തോഷങ്ങൾ ഇല്ലാതാക്കുന്ന ഒരു അവസ്ഥ ഉണ്ടാകാതിരിക്കുക. ആ രീതിയിലുള്ള ഒരു കോൺഫിഡൻസ് മൈൻഡോട് കൂടി കുട്ടിക്ക് വളർന്നു വരാൻ പറ്റുന്ന രീതിയിൽ നമുക്ക് ഈ ഒരു കാര്യത്തെ നമുക്ക് പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കാൻ പറ്റുമെന്നാണ് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നത്. ഒരിക്കലും നമ്മൾ ഹാപ്പിനെസ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് മറ്റൊരാളെ നമ്മൾ സ്നേഹിക്കുക എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ അത് നെഗറ്റീവ് സൈഡിലേക്ക് പോകാനായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ചാൻസ് ഉണ്ട്. ഇപ്പം മറ്റൊരാളുടെ അപ്പൊ അവര് നമ്മളെ തിരിച്ച് സ്നേഹിക്കുന്നില്ല എന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നമുക്കത് പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കാനായിട്ടുള്ള സാധ്യതയുണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെയുള്ള ഒരു പ്രശ്നങ്ങളിലേക്ക് പോകാതെ അപ്പൊ ആദ്യമേ തന്നെ ഒരു ഉറച്ച മൈൻഡോട് കൂടി മുന്നോട്ട് പോകാനായിട്ട് ഈ ഒരു വ്യൂ സഹായിക്കും.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Vijay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Anju has a child of 3 or 4 years and she is expecting her next baby by the beginning of next year, 2023. So I think that baby is also getting benefit because mother is speaking about happiness, meaning of life, etc. Isn't it, Anju?
Okay, sir.
As Guru said in Pindapati.
Yes.
Yes. So I have a comment here. I think we are speaking about the philosophical aspects, theoretical aspects, but when we actualize, there can be a gradation in life. At the one end, we have the lowest level where we live like animals, and the other highest level is the level of a Buddha or Jesus or Prophet Nabi or Bharana Guru. In between, we can have gradations where we actually implement it in our daily life. I think at least we can go up from the level of the bottom level, even if we cannot reach the highest level. I think so. In my experience, how we actually practice it in our daily life and how it differs from the pure theoretical aspects or philosophical aspects, and how we apply it, there can be differences. So we'll move to the next paper, that is What Gives Human Life Meaning by Madam Selina Sadashivan. Bharana Guru says that Peru, Uru, Todil is the moon porum. That means when we introduce a person, the name should be given, the place should be given, and the vocation or calling also should be given. So the name is already known. She lives in London, and She is a screenplay writer and director, and also a student of the Narayana Gurukula educational movement. She is the director of the recently screened film on Guru Muni, Being and Becoming. To my knowledge, I don't know whether it is correct or not, she has a company of film production, Darley Vision Productions, isn't it, ma'am? Darley Vision Productions, which claims that, or which notifies that films that make a difference. So she owns a company where they make films that make a difference. And also, I had the opportunity to see her video in a blog where she was inspired from Joan of Arc, and she directed a movie, Knock of Janus, isn't it, in 2018. To my knowledge, the theme is the emotional crisis of middle-aged women, isn't it? I could not see the full movie, but to my understanding, that is the theme, the emotional crisis of middle-aged women, especially related with the menopause stage. It's about her Sunil. And also she says that she is in a journey of happiness, sometimes traveling alone and sometimes with the company of others. And she has also invited to join her to her journey of happiness in the blog. So let us join her journey to happiness by listening to the paper. What gives human life meaning? Please, Selina ma'am.
Thank you. Namaskaram Guru Muni, Namaskaram Swamis. Dr. Sabu, thank you for that introduction. You've done some research, right? You looked at the website, hooray. And dear friend, thank you. Okay. Kya kaam ho? Okay.
Some disturbance, some noise is there. I'm not sure whether it is from your side or somebody else.
It's clearer now, thank you.
Now it is clear. Now it is clear. It's clear.
Okay. So what gives human life meaning? Socrates used to say that the only thing he was aware of was his ignorance, suggesting that the realization of our ignorance is the first step in reasoning and to knowledge. To know that we do not know suggests an open perspective to understanding. Thinking we know suggests a more conclusive and closed notions of understanding. Simple ignorance is being aware of one's own ignorance, whereas double ignorance is not being aware of one's own ignorance while thinking that one knows. Most of us, I suppose, before we start to learn about ourselves, we think we know, we are in that knowledge of thinking that we know, because all we know is the perceived world and objects, and that's the life we know. But we eventually realize the beginning of it is that there's a lot that we don't know. So Socrates died in Athens in 399 BC after a trial for impiety and the corrupting minds of the young. He died in accordance with his sentence after drinking poison hemlock. The official charges were 1, corrupting youth, 2, worshipping false gods, and 3, not worshipping the state religion. Some of these things are still happening in today's world. Socrates did not document his teachings. All we know of him comes from the accounts of others, mainly the philosopher Plato and the historian Xenophon, who were both his pupils, and later from Plato's pupil Aristotle, who was born after Socrates' death. One can use Socrates, which is the reason I'm speaking so much about Socrates. We can use Socrates as a method of reference to consider different perspectives on what gives meaning to life, purely because his life had one extreme of wisdom to being put to death. It's a variety of life. So was Socrates' life worth living at the time he was killed? It's a deeply painful experience to be killed by poison. One could argue that it was therefore a meaningless life, one that ended tragically. Can we say that his life was meaningful is the same as asking whether his life was a pleasant one? Indeed, some would say that Socrates' life logically was meaningful, precisely because he sacrificed his well-being by helping others at the expense of his own self-interest. and perhaps not at all meaningful, viewed in the respect of the individual interest, as he was put to the death. So one can ask whether Socrates' existence is meaningful purely in relation to whether he was a morally upright individual. It was surely his morals that drove him to defy the norms of the society of the time. But there are intuitive ways to enhance meaning that have nothing to do with right action or moral virtue. So life has meaning apart from right action and moral virtue. Some argue that we lack self-governance or free will of the sort that is essential for meaning in life. The philosopher Immanuel Kant reaffirmed this link between freedom and goodness. If we are not free to choose, he argued, then it would make no sense to say we ought to choose the path of righteousness. So if we have no freedom to choose, what is the righteous moral standing? What's the meaning of that? Surely we must have some free will to be able to make those choices. So Socrates' life, was Socrates' life meaningful to the officials who sentenced him to death? Well, the decision to end his life unnaturally was made by others, perhaps suggesting his life was not meaningful to them. The decision to end his life was made by others, hence his freedom of choice was taken away from him. And perhaps therefore thinking that he may heavily influence the minds of others made his life perhaps too meaningful in that sense, and they needed to put him to death. Therefore, to the question of what, if anything, makes a person's life meaningful is conceptually distinct from the question of what makes a life righteous or moral. Was Socrates' life meaningful to Plato, who was his pupil? Well, history has confirmed the teachings of Socrates went beyond time and generations, even after his death to today. What he taught his pupil and Plato's contribution to Western philosophy confirms his life held great meaning for others beyond time. Was Socrates' life meaningful to Socrates? Well, to Socrates, perhaps life had meaning above his individual self in his own death, as he spent his last day in prison among friends and followers who offered to help find a route to escape, but he refused it. Life, therefore, had a higher subjective meaning, and perhaps he saw his meaning of life was to serve the purpose of the community above his own individual needs and self-interest. But was it all a sense of innate moral sense of self-sacrifice and an altruistic act? Well, perhaps. When we look at the moral sense for Darwin, he derived his moral sense from biological descent from animal instinct and the research that he did, particularly with the social instincts developed by natural selection. From this perspective, Darwin then argued for a genuine homology of ethical foundations holding between humans and animals, with the precursors of human ethical behavior found in the behavior of other animals, particularly those with social organization. Natural and sexual selection then shaped these ethical instincts in ways that favored group survival rather than immediate individual benefit. I'll put the references all at the end if that's okay. Because Darwin considered ethical action to be grounded on a biological innate property. The innate moral sense is his explanation for self-sacrifice and other altruistic acts that cannot be attributed to individual self-survival. So what I understand from that is the idea that when we do actions based on moral grounds of high ethics and altruistic needs, but are they all based on just our altruistic need to make us that much more kinder or that much more wonderful? Could it be the possibility that we have an innate instinct for survival, and part of that survival need is to behave and work as a group, so therefore we have a better stance of natural selection becoming much stronger in the next generation? So those notions are two kind of not contradictory, but different ideas and perspectives. At the time, was Socrates' life worth being born? I conclude his life holds great influence for me and adds great value to my life today. So his life has a significant meaning to life for me, an unexplainable meaning. Do we know for sure what gives meaning to life, therefore? Is it not enough that we have some sort of passion for worthwhile things, like music or dance or love for others? After all, we cannot all be destined to become a Kalidasa, a Socrates, or Shakespeare. Philosophies of the meaning of life seem to fall into, therefore, one of the four groups. Life has an objective meaning, life has a subjective meaning, life has no meaning, and life has a supernatural or unexplainable meaning. Those were the ideas that I tried to apply to Socrates' life in looking at perspectives. I'm not sure if I did achieve that. I'm going to give a short introduction of different groups of thinking on the meaning of life through the ages, particularly the Western philosophers, as we're all more familiar with the mainstream ancient Indian philosophy, including the 6 systems of darshanas, all which date back to more than 3,000 years old, I understand. I could be wrong, so. Okay, in Europe, the great philosopher Epicurus offered that the meaning of life was in achieving sustainable pleasure, which leads to a state of tranquility and freedom from fear. I think a lot of this Andrew's covered, which was a wonderful talk as well. In Platonism, the meaning of life is attaining the highest form of knowledge, just things derive utility and value. According to Immanuel Kant, the meaning of life is the pursuit of the highest good. According to Aristotle, the meaning of life or purpose of life is to be happy every time. We can choose to be happy until we cease to exist. Happiness is not a pleasure, rather it is a virtue to be happy. According to Socrates, the meaning of life or the purpose of life should be both personal and spiritual. One should focus on developing her or his skills in both personal and spiritual parts of life. A life that is unknown to oneself is not considered to be a fulfilled life. Experiencing reality by interacting authentically with the environment and with others. Authentically, my understanding with the environment is to be truthful to oneself as much as one can be. Giving something back to the world through creativity and self-expression, and changing our attitude when faced with a situation or circumstance that we cannot change. Notions of maybe adaptability. Nietzsche, on the other hand, portrays Socrates differently as follows. Socrates corrupts mankind by teaching that the world is rational and that reason should rule in the soul and in the city. Socrates' dialectical way showed the traditional gods and laws of all nations to be inconsistent and therefore defective. Then there are others who view life as it has no meaning. According to nihilism, difficult word to pronounce, nihilism rationale is the combination of extreme supernaturalism about what makes life meaningful, and that all our lives are actually meaningless. Taking us to hedonism, appearing around 4th century BC, seeking pleasure and avoiding suffering like eating, dancing, and playing music are meaningful in themselves. Modern humanism circulated in the late 1300s, pointing out that humans themselves are responsible for the fate of humans in this world. Thus, promoting and helping other humans is the meaning of life. This leads to subjectivism, early 1600s. The meaning of life varies by individual depending on one's mental state. And subjectivism is attributed to René Descartes and his thought experiment. I think, therefore I exist. Or perhaps should I state, I exist, therefore I think, according to more of the Eastern way of thinking. Then liberalism, appearing in 1889, the liberalists trust that a person is naturally free to choose what to do without permission from any other person. The notions of free will. Kantianism appeared in 1785, proposed that every human action should be judged according to a universal maxim or principle. So the meaning of life is in fulfilling your duty to follow universal principles. Some maintain that focusing on what gives meaning to life, that it is conceptually something good for its own sake, or relatedly something that provides a basic reason for action. In reply, some maintain that compatibilism, I had to do a bit of research on this, is the position of view that causal determinism is true, but we still act as free, morally responsible agents when in the absence of external constraints. Our actions are caused by our desires. Compatibilism does not maintain that humans are free between determinism and moral responsibility. And moral responsibility applies with comparable force to meaning in life. So there is the notion of free will, whether if life, my understanding is, if I'm sure everybody is more knowledgeable on this, but my understanding is that the notion of free will, do we have free will, or is our life determined? And if our lives are determined, then what's the point? And how can we make choices, and our choices, are they relevant or meaningful? If lives are either meaningful or meaningless, depending on whether we have free will or not, we might probably be situated in the middle ground. Rather, we act out of love, compassion, and kindness. What is the meaning of meaning? When we give meaning to something, therefore, we are implying a relationship between two sorts of things: what we intend to express in relation to something else, what is being represented, thereby we can be better understood. They can be words and nonverbal symbols, communication, so that we can understand ideas and notions. There are things in the world that are subjective and objective. The major contemporary positions of meaning come under the following partial definitions of meaning. I won't go into that too much more detail, but psychological, logical, message, truth conditions, usage, measurement, etc. So who are we? My perspective is that we are a physical body of living matter with a subjective mind. Therefore, both physical and metaphysical, as signs of the absolute, are common notions serving as a normative reference for all sciences. Of course, we all know the ideas, who and where they came from. We can use a common structure to which subjective thinking and objective events can be referred to for normalization and renormalization. And this being the case, the notion of the absolute is within the reach of human understanding. Nataraja Guru, I really found this really interesting, because I think the notion of normalization and renormalization, when change is happening in the world, but having still a common structure, is absolutely a wonderful, thought-provoking notion and idea, which I think is quite profound. The origin of life. In biology, abiogenesis, or the origin of life, is a natural process by which life has arisen from long non-living matter, such as simple organic compounds. And most of the hypotheses of the origin of life fall into one of the four categories. Again, I should quickly run through this. The origin of life is a result of supernatural event. Life particularly formed in simple forms spontaneously. Life is co-eternal with matter and has no beginning. And life arose on the early earth by a series of progressive chemical changes. What's life all about? We are more than just a state, therefore, or an organism that grows, reproduces, and responds to stimuli in a physical world. We know that because we have questions and we have ideas that sometimes cannot be answered, that we search for. The causality idea stated by Nataraja Guru is a principle of a universal basis of functioning at the core of the process of becoming, to which the whole of the universe is subjected and seen, the unfolding of oneself from being to becoming. And as Guru Muni explained earlier, it made it a little bit more clear for me when he talked about how there is only the cause, the other, what we are as material, what we are just the events, expression of the cause. Thank you, Guru, for explaining that in more detail. What is the purpose of life? The purpose of life for me is to be happy and live a worthwhile life with meaningful goals that serve the subjective, mental, and objective physical world that I witness, i.e. myself as the individual self finding my place in the community and the universe. Is there a reality outside of the universal observer? So what is the essence of life? Is the essence of life the we, the community, or the I, the individual, or both? Is there a middle ground? There are several certain possible modes. Sorry about time. Okay. There are several certain possible modes of action that are open to any rational being who can act at all, and who can also reflect upon his or her own modes of possible action. We set goals, we operate and make assumptions in this objective world based on our activity and on the nature of our needs, leading to actions that are related to other people, society, by thousands of reciprocal actions and reactions. Again, Nataraja Guru. Again, I love this notion that the notion that we as individuals, we maybe take action as individuals, and they may be very simple notions or ideas, but they have a ripple effect, and that ripple effect causes different reactions or actions. So it's a wonderful way of looking at what our actions and how our actions react with other people. An integrated notion of the absolute can alone act as a regulative reference in this matter of physics and metaphysics. Joshua Rose was a leading American proponent of absolute idealism and metaphysical view that all aspects of reality, including those we experience as disconnected or contradictory, are ultimately unified in the thought of a single, all-encompassing consciousness. I take note, this is in 1855, but this notions of the all-encompassing consciousness was already notions in the East. Is life meaningless? In Hamlet's soliloquy, there is more than just the famous line, to be or not to be. I'll skip the words, but it seems to be more specifically focused on the suicide question. Hamlet is also meditating on what happens when we die, and Shakespeare created a character being pulled in conflicting directions, compelling notions of desires of life and the notions of death. Suppose our death is looming, meaningless will be more evident. But suppose there is, sorry?
Excuse me, are we nearing conclusion?
Yeah, I'm just running to the conclusion. Okay, so conclusion in my words. To find a conclusive meaning to meaning is like saying the jasmine flower is better than the rose. Who is to say it? What context? What is its history? What is culture? And what is association with the one with the flower? In terms of categorizing, you can say, yes, and label the flower and the jasmine and the rose. But how do you, however, give meaning to the beauty factor of one over the other? And that this notion of beauty and one's internal experience with the objective world. Hence, what gives meaning to life depends on how the conscious person is situated inside one's proper world of discourse. Again, I quote Nataraja Guru. But leading to total reality is therefore viewed from inside the total situation. An inward-facing attitude, the observer and the observed must belong together at the same knowledge situation. The objective world outside and experience within. One must be aware of living a life that gives joy and happiness to oneself and to others. Respect that others have the same regard, thereby transcending contradictions and conflicts. Perhaps the language of Satchit Ananda is a universal language that unifies all divisions of thought and gives a comprehensive clarity to the meaning of life. And I've referenced what I need to. Thank you. Sorry, Dr. Sabu. The meaning of life is a big topic. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Selena. She mentioned about the different dimensions of meaning of life, different isms defining the meaning of life, and also the contributions of Nataraja Guru in defining the meaning of life and also attaining happiness by this methodology of normalization and renormalization. That's all Nataraja Guru's contributions to philosophy. So now it is open for the participants.
Can I, sir?
We can have a quick discussion.
Can I, sir? Hello.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir. Can I?
Please, sir, please, sir.
Actually, what is meaning of the life? And explaining this, you have given the example of the Socrates, and the life of the Socrates is a really worth living life. But if we think about the Socrates life, at the end, actually, the person whose responsibility to give the hemlock to the Socrates, actually he forgot. But Socrates demanded for the hemlock. Then there is a death of the Socrates. Then actually from the Socrates point of view, this incident is happy or the sorrowful. Actually there is a really what can we say that? Can you highlight actually or do the more explanation about this? This incident is actually happy or the sorrowful?
Sorry, let me clarify what you are asking. Are you asking me the fact that he chose to drink the hemlock, was that his happiness? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Actually, there was actually death of the Socrates. From one side, actually, Socrates died for the thought.
Yes.
He died for the thought, and actually, if you think about the life of the Socrates, there is no actually that is a mistake of the Socrates or there is no actually crime of the Socrates, because actually he was doing the work of the enlightenment, particularly in youth. Therefore, actually, it is good work, but the people can't understand. And actually, there was a different types of the that is crime imposed on the Socrates, and there was a death of the Socrates.
So you made some comments, sir. Some comments only, isn't it?
No,
sir? Yeah, sir. Do you have any specific question, or it's only a comment?
No, sir. I want there is question, sir. Actually, what is the question? There was a death of the Socrates. Then actually, how can we understand this incident is of the sorrow or this incident is of the happiness?
I don't understand the question. I'm sorry. So, Dr. Sabit, can you?
I also have the same condition. I could not follow the question properly. Narar sir, could you repeat the question?
Sir, actually, see there was a death of Socrates. Okay. Then this incident, this incident, that is the death of the Socrates. This fact is, or this incident is, how can we consider this is a happyful incident or there is a sorrowful incident?
Yeah. You see, this is why I use Socrates as a reference of looking at the different ways, looking at the different perspectives. If Socrates chose to drink the hemlock, obviously he didn't write it, we only know through what was written after, but if Socrates chose to drink the hemlock, I presume he didn't probably have much of a choice to whether he should drink it or not. Maybe they would have forced him to have it. But the fact that he could have escaped again suggests that he wanted to perhaps make more of a point by using his life and his ideas rather than escaping, and by drinking the hemlock, maybe he was trying to make the point that his way of looking at these way of looking dialectically at theories and ideas and notions about the religion maybe there and what was happening there, would have more of a value for the next generation, which it did have. However, whether he was a pleasant experience or whether he wanted to do that, today's time, I would say people look for a more middle ground and way of discussing and debating these ideas. But I suppose in different countries, there are still people who are being killed for having different views and ideas. Does that answer the question? I'm not sure.
Okay, I think if further clarifications are required, we can look at the end, isn't it? Is it fine, sir? Is it fine, sir? Narayan, sir, is it okay?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So now we have an introduction to Nataraja Guru's autobiography. The title of the autobiography is Autobiography of an Absolutist. So, after thanking Selina Sadashivan, before inviting Sanal Madhav to present the paper, I think by way of a few remarks, moderator's remarks, let me give a few additional comments. By integrating both the papers, the role of wisdom in seeking happiness and also the meaning of life in a different language, as I derive from Narada Guru's works through the commentaries of the Guru tradition. In verse 9 of Atmopadesha Satakam, Narada Guru gives a beautiful imagery of a tree. He repeats that imagery in verse 51 also. So in a philosophical text, when something is repeated, that's a message to convey that that's a core idea or core imagery of that particular work. So we can take this imagery of tree as one of the very important schematic presentations of Guru's philosophy. And in between this 9th verse and 51st verse, there is an analysis of consciousness in verses 36 to 42. And also in his work Brahma Vidya Panchagam, Guru is using the same age-old great dictums, 4 dictums are using. So combining all this and by grasping the idea from the commentaries, we can put the meaning of life and also why the internal happiness is not properly seen by us. So Anju was speaking about the inherent happiness of human beings, and happiness is not depending on the external factors. Selina was referring about the ignorance pointed out by Socrates. And by combining these two, this ignorance can be further analyzed using Narada Guru's works. And in Indian tradition, I think it is Patanjali who defined that ignorance is nothing but mistaking non-self as self or self as non-self is ignorance. And using this imagery of Narada Guru in the trees, tree has a root, it has fruits, and in that imagery, it has 2 branches. There is a vine, that vine has 2 aspects. So the roots of the tree, that can be compared to the foundation of life. Fruits of the tree can be compared to the goal of life. And the 2 sides of the vine, that represents the internal or subjective appraisal of a particular phenomenon or situation, and the other side is the objective experience that we experience objectively. But we have 4 sides. The foundation of life represented by the tree, the meaning of life or goal of life represented by the fruits, the subjective appraisal, and also the objective experiences. So we have 4 dimensions of life using the structuralism given by Nataraja Guru. When we unite the foundation of life and the meaning of life represented by the roots and fruits of the tree, there is a vertical parameter, and we have a horizontal parameter represented by the 2 vines, the subjective appraisal and the objective experience. In all these 4 aspects, there are possibilities of errors, and these possibilities are creating the errors, and these errors are hiding the actual happiness that is inherent within us, and we mistake the happiness as though it is placed in external objects. Corrections are also possible for all these 4 different types of errors. For the foundational error, technically, using philosophical language, we can call it as an epistemological error. And the error that is induced by the wrong identification of the goal of life or the meaning of life can be called as an axiological error or teleological error. And the subjective appraisal, we need a proper measuring rod. When that measuring rod is wrong, we have mistake. And that can be considered as a methodological error. We cannot ask for 2 kilometers of rice. There should be a proper measuring rod. And also we cannot measure distance in kilograms. The norm should be very correct. When the norm of appraisal is wrong, there is a methodological error. And also mistaking actual things as non-actual and non-actual things as actual. That's another error. The objective experience side, that can be called as an ontological error. We cannot say that the coronavirus is just a Maya. It's actually it is there. We cannot mistake that. So that type of mistakes are also there. These are all the ontological error. So we have 4 different aspects of life. The foundational aspects, the meaning of life or the goal of life, the subjective appraisal, and the objective experience. The errors relating to the foundational problem is epistemological errors. The error related to the goal of life is teleological or axiological errors. And the error that is related to the appraisal of actual and non-actual, that is known as ontological errors. These errors can be corrected using the 4 traditional great dictums: Ayam Atma Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi, and Satnanam Brahma. The error related to the foundational aspects of life, the epistemological error can be corrected using Aham Brahmasmi, I am the Brahman. The foundation is, we are not the body, I am not the body, I am the Brahman. That's a correction. And the methodological error can be corrected using the great dictum, I am Atma Brahma. The self of mind is the absolute. That's another measuring rod, correct measuring rod. And the mistake of identifying an actual thing as non-actual and non-actual as actual, the ontological error, that can be corrected using the great dictum, Prajnana Brahma. The object seen outside is represented or manifested as my own knowledge. That is Prajnana Brahma. And finally, we have a great dictum to correct the goal of life, to fix the goal of life. What should be the ultimate aim of life? And that is given by Tattvamasi, that thou art, Adu ni agunnu. That should be the goal of life. So this is a philosophical way of conceiving the role of wisdom in attaining happiness of life, and also fixing the meanings of life related to the foundational aspects of life, the meaning of life, the correct measuring rod, and how to appraisal the external objects. So this is how Narayana Guru, or this is one way of deciphering this meaning of life and the role of wisdom from Narayana Guru's works using Atmopadesha Shatakam and Brahma Vidya Panchakam. In Brahma Vidya Panchakam, Guru quotes the 4 great dictums. The imageries are given in Atmopadesha Shatakam. In verse 36 to 42, it is in the analytical fashion according to the modern scientific language. And in verse 9 and verse 51, the same concept is presented in a very beautiful form of imagery form, in the form of an analogy. So combining these two, we can put these 4 in a structural fashion based on the structuralism presented by Nataraja Guru, with a vertical dimension of life and a horizontal dimension of life. Both has positive poles and negative poles in both vertical dimension as well as in horizontal dimension. So by identifying the proper aspects of foundation, the meaning, the measuring rod, and the appraisal of the external world, many of the problems can be solved, at least theoretically. How we apply it in our individual life, that depends on to what extent we meditate on it, to what extent we internalize it. So with that, brief comments from the moderator, we'll move to the next paper. the autobiography of the founder of Narayana Gurukulam. One of the sentences written by Nadaraj Guru, which I always recall, is accidents do not happen to us. We happen to accidents. Me too had an accident about 30 years ago. Literally, it was an accident happened. At that time, accidentally, I got the autobiography of Nadaraj Guru when I was bedridden to read the book. That was the book I read at that time. It was only that accidental reading and the actual accident that made me to sit here as a moderator of this particular seminar. Had I not read the autobiography of Nadaraj Guru, I would not have been that much interested towards philosophical aspects in general and the subtle aspects of Narayana Guru's philosophy. So anybody who read that book will be naturally attracted towards subtle and higher dimensions of life, surely. So we have Sanal Masav to present an introduction to Nadaraj Guru's autobiography. The title is Autobiography of an Absolutist. Sanal Masav is again, he lives in London. He was actually born in Kerala at the age of 1.5 years. He was emigrated to London. Now he lives there. By profession, he is a software engineer. He too is part of the study program of Narayana Gurukulam. Earlier also we had opportunities to sit together in Guru Muni's book, Philosophy Simplified for Youths. He was there, we were together. So with pleasure, let me invite Sanal Masav to give the introduction on Nadaraj Guru's autobiography. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Sabu. So earlier today, Guru Muni had explained the difference between wisdom and knowledge. And in Dr. Sabu's introduction to his 3 papers, a common thread of wisdom was established. So this presentation today is on the autobiography of a very wise one. So Nadaraj Guru is a Himalayan mountain, and there are many ways to cross this mountain. I've decided to do it this way, and as a way of setting context, I started by giving a background, and accidentally it might flow with the 2 previous papers. So in this background, Narayana Guru was born in a land at a time where rampant, cruel discrimination was a norm, and it became the motivation for Narayana Guru to understand the human lot, why humans do this. And it took many long years of penance and withdrawal to arrive at the truth. And with this, Narayana Guru re-entered society. And the resulting society that Narayana Guru left in September 1928 was far different to the one he had been born into. And how that was achieved, just like his long years of penance, is a great mystery, let alone the truth he arrived at. But that something quite wonderful happened in Kerala is absolutely and abundantly clear. And as a result, many in Kerala worship Narayana Guru. So how did Narayana Guru re-enter society? The chief medical officer of Mysore at that time, Dr. Paupul, was forced to work outside of his native Kerala due to the discrimination that existed there. And Dr. Paupul had met Swami Vivekananda in Bangalore, and he sought him. Dr. Paupul had heard Swami Vivekananda describe Kerala as a lunatic asylum. So Dr. Paupul sought Swami Vivekananda to help make a change in Kerala. However, Swami Vivekananda suggested that he discover a guru who had already been born in Kerala. And through Dr. Paupul's investigations and seeking advice from friends and family, Dr. Paupul discovered Narayana Guru. By the time Nataraja Guru was born, a son of Dr. Paupu, known as P. Natarajan at the time, Narayana Guru was a regular visitor to the home of his father in Bangalore and in Kerala. And after P. Natarajan's studies and his youthful interactions with Narayana Guru, P. Natarajan became an inmate of Narayana Guru's Advaita ashram in Alvay. Soon after, P. Natarajan formed the Narayana Gurukula, an educational institution named with minimum letters in the name of the Guru. Narayana Guru considered the young P. Natarajan someone quite special and personally funded his studies in Europe. In May 1928, P. Natarajan taught at the International School in Gland, Switzerland, and undertook a D.Litt at Sorbonne in Paris, France. By the time Nataraja Guru was to return to Kerala 5 years later, Narayana Guru had already passed away. So P. Natarajan had celebrated the Guru's birthday in Europe and decided to deeply engage in the Guru's teachings. As a result, the articles written in the English language, published in Narayana Gurukula magazine Values, and then subsequently published as books. A rich library exists with which to understand the mystery that is Narayana Guru. The subsequent inmates of the Narayana Gurukula have to this day continued this wisdom lineage, written primarily in English and Malayalam. The Narayana Gurukula bookshop furnishes the finest library on the teachings of Narayana Guru. The commentaries on the teachings written by Nataraja Guru, his successor, Guru Nitya Chaitanya Yadi, and the current successor, Guru Muni Nayana Prasad, help us to understand and process the rich mystical language used by Narayana Guru to convey the great unknown, or the absolute. The Pacific Ocean cannot be measured with a mere measuring tape, but we can try to sample some of its vastness. A drop contains the goodness of the entirety. So on this note, it is time to introduce Nataraja Guru's autobiography, An Absolutist. So this book is an autobiography, yet it is much more than the average autobiography. And I'm going to attempt to share an introduction to one of the most brilliant books that I have certainly ever read. So this book is an autobiography. Nataraja Guru gives intimate details of the young P. Natarajan being born into plush surroundings, his parents, his siblings, his schooling, his friends, his interests, his misdemeanors, his encounters with Narayana Guru from such a tender age, and his refusal to prostrate in front of the Guru, who would become his life's dedication. So all these details, Nataraja Guru lays bare for all. He covers his entire life, warts and all, his trials and his tribulations, his joys, his fears, right to the very end, an end which is our beginning. Yet this book is much more than an autobiography. It is an excuse for Nataraja Guru to do what he does best, what he devoted his whole life to lay bare the Advaita Vedanta of Narayana Guru, especially to the English-speaking world. Nataraja Guru read 100 pages a day from the whole breadth of human knowledge, and this book reflects the encyclopedic range of his interests. So subjects such as literature, science, art, music, history, geography, mathematics, politics, as well as philosophy, and many that I haven't even thought about are covered from a Western perspective and an Eastern one. The author of this book is an integrator of the science of the sciences. The other key word in the title of this book is absolutist. And I remember at the beginning, before reading this book, trying to grapple with this word. And I also remember I utterly failed in grasping it. But it's a lofty concept. And as all lofty concepts, it is not easily accessed, but the understanding does come word by word, page by page, chapter by chapter, throughout the adventure that is this book. So it is a personal pleasure to be able to attempt to introduce such a book on the eve of the centenary of the Narayana Gurukula. found in no less than the author of this book. And so far, I've made some bold claims about this book. Now I must qualify them in the subsequent sections. So from a science perspective, the Rajaguru was very fond of Henry Bergson, who had proposed an alternative theory of evolution called creative evolution. Whereas Charles Darwin's theory is somewhat mechanistic, Bergson's theory has an artistic flavor and a will that drives a change. Mother Rajaguru found Bergson's theory to be much more aligned with that of Narayana Guru's. Years later, Narayana Guru had queried the young P. Natarajan on the Darwin's notion of evolution and inquired whether anyone had seen a monkey with half a tail. Another of Henry Bergson's works, Duration and Simultaneity, a riposte on Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, proved, in Nataraja Guru's words, a hard nut to crack, and it took Nataraja Guru a year-long challenge for Nataraja Guru to appreciate how Henry Bergson had tackled the subject of relativity and absolutism. And it was so much so that the French journals of the time had regretted Henry Bergson had published such a work. However, the insights from this would influence Nataraja Guru's subsequent magnum opus, Integrated Science of the Absolute. From a literature perspective, Nataraja Guru references many great authors, and he says a whole lifetime of education could sometimes be contained within the covers of some great books written by the kings of literature. The French author Victor Hugo, who wrote Les Miserables, had a particular influence on Nataraja Guru. It starts with the story of Jean Valjean, who is convicted for stealing a loaf of bread to feed his sister's hungry children. On the release of the convict, he is marked, and society considers him a bad man. A father offers him refuge, yet Jean Valjean steals from that father and is subsequently caught by the police, who recognize the silverware that he has stolen. The father explains that Jean Valjean had not stolen it, but had been given to him. And he also gives 2 silver candlesticks to Jean Valjean, and in return asks him to become a good man. The subsequent actions of Jean Valjean and the good role that he plays in society fills another 1,000 pages of the book. And Nataraja Guru would have read this novel in the original French language and recognize the qualities of mankind. So Nataraja Guru's autobiography inspired me to go and watch a musical that had been playing in London continuously since 1985. And I would see it 30 years after its first showing. The kings of literature, as Nataraja Guru calls them, are like seeds waiting patiently for the right time with which to sprout. And they did so in the mind of Nataraja Guru. Nataraja Guru references Charles Dickens, Leo Tolstoy, Voltaire, Shakespeare, Kalidasa, Goethe, Milton, and many more throughout the autobiography. On the subject of art, Nataraja Guru was a great admirer. There's a whole chapter called Art, Reflections, and Happy Hobos. And in Nataraja Guru's world, art is integrated with the happy gamins like the Gavroche of Victor Hugo and becomes the sadhus of India. Freedom and expression. I had no idea that these were so important and critical in life. I remember going through school thinking art was a non-subject, but this autobiography changed my views on that. In terms of music, Nataraja Guru's reflection on music identifies a man's heart filled with loneliness and emotion in that of Beethoven. In Mozart, a sensitive specimen of a human being, a product of refinement drawn up by the mixing of various races of those days in European history, in which ships crossed from the Dark Continent or from Semitic Palestine and the Moorish and more barbarian countries of the West. With the memories of Mozart's Requiem revived in him connotations of his ancestors and hardship and woes transitioning into hopeful notes of the beautiful riverside city of Vienna. Music and its environs distilled into the simple, living, and high-thinking way. In terms of geography, living in London, I'm very well aware of the Greenwich Meridian, but not so much of the meridian that lies on the other side of the world. As Nataraja circled the globe, he crossed the international date line. I remember realizing that when we refer to the West and to the East, when we look at the world map from the perspective of the international date line, the separation of Russia and America is ever so slight. Geographically, they are very much close neighbors. Politically, they are poles apart. That is a mind which is well and truly set and would do well to reset. Economics. An opulent economy relies on scarcity and competition. Man is pitted against man, and a dog-eat-dog world emerges. The corollary is an abundantist economy, which encourages a cooperative spirit. It becomes a basis of a one world, with all for one and one for all, and equitable world citizenship. The final topic I'm going to consider from this is mathematics. The chance factor is something I see as no longer a random incident nor a coincidence. The chance factor becomes a double gain when considered favorable and can be made more favorable. It is not in a gambling sense, but in the sense of being open to providence. Nataraja Guru uses the words possibilities and probabilities very often in this book, and they become more than just mechanical statistical operators. They are a maze in which chance must work its delicate way through. And the word Tao, Nataraja Guru is fully open to the way of the Tao and letting it decide for him. He even attributes the Tao to deciding for him a teacher's career. So finally, some concluding words. It was at John Spears' insistence in Nataraja Guru writing his autobiography. Although Nataraja Guru flatly refused many times, it was John Spears' persistence and even a threat from him to write a biography on Nataraja Guru that caused Nataraja Guru to tell his own story. And the chapters in this book were originally presented in the Values Gurukula magazine, edited by John Spears. In order to appreciate this book, it has to be read. And we discovered that the finest way of reading such a book is to do it as part of a group. We were fortunate to read this book chapter by chapter each week with Sami Tanmaya a few years ago. Each week, one person volunteered to give a 10-minute summary of the chapter. Then we will go around the table and everyone will be given a few minutes to give their understanding, their perspectives on that chapter and raise any doubts they had. In this way, the original summary was complemented, and we found that at the end of an hour and a half, we had a much rounder, more deeper understanding of the chapter. This continued until the book was completed. It is with this blessing that I am able to present this introduction today. Yet I'm all too aware that I've only read this book once, and that is not enough for a work such as this. And that too before completing the Atma Upanishadam classes with Nancy Yoding and Samita Agastron. I am sure when I read this book again, it will read entirely differently. On the cover of the book, there is a lamp with a flame. At the base of the lamp is the Alpha symbol. And at the top, the symbol of the Omega. From the ground level, the here and now, to a higher dimension, also in the here and now, Narayana Guru reminded us what it is to be human again in this life, to live simply and to think highly. Nataraja Guru was inspired by that and lived his life by that. it continues as it inspires today. That is the value and the great fortune of the Narayana Gurukula, and that is our great fortune too. Thank you, Dr. Sama.
Thank you. That was a very beautiful, concise introduction to the contents of Nararaja Guru's autobiography. There was a reference about Henry Bergson. He was probably the dearest Western philosopher, dear to Nararaja Guru. And Henry Bergson was occupying a chair in University of Paris, Sorbonne, while Nararaja Guru was a student in 1928 to 1932 in Sorbonne University. So he had opportunities, probably he might have chances to meet Henry Bergson, attending his lectures. So Henry Bergson was very dear to him. And also there are comments about objections of Henry Bergson about theory of evolution and also Einstein's theory of relativity. And his objections were recently in news. Last year was the centenary of awarding Nobel Prize to Albert Einstein. The very interesting aspect is that the most important contribution of Albert Einstein to science is theory of relativity. But the Nobel Committee was reluctant to give Nobel Prize for that particular topic. They gave it to another topic, photoelectric effects. Recently, last year, a lot of discussions were there. Why the Nobel Committee was not prepared to give him Nobel Prize for the most valuable contribution to science? It was revealed that it was because of the objections of Henry Bergson. He said it was science grafted on metaphysics. It's not actually physics, it is physics grafted on metaphysics. That was the comment of Henry Bergson. And that's why the Nobel Committee was not ready to give Nobel Prize for that particular discovery. So they gave it for photoelectric effect. And let me recall a very interesting comparison between Henry Bergson and Narada Guru made by Nararaja Guru. I could not recollect where it is written or whether I heard from Guru Muni or some other associates of Nararaja Guru. So Nararaja Guru once commented that among the Western philosophers, Henry Bergson is very near to Narada Guru in his approach, concepts. But Narada Guru was inside the sanctum sanctorum of wisdom, whereas Henry Bergson was just standing just outside and looking inside the sanctum sanctorum. That difference is there. He was not inside it, but just outside it. That was the assessment of Nararaja Guru, a comparison between Henry Bergson and Narada Guru. One thing I can assure is that whoever reads the autobiography of Nararaja Guru, that will be a turning point in life. I am the guarantee. Absolutely no doubt. That is the autobiography of an absolutist. And absolutely no doubt, if we read the autobiography of Nararaja Guru, that will be a turning point in our life. No doubt. So now it is open for questions, please. Nothing? Or else we'll move towards conclusion or hand over the mic to Guru Muni if you wish to speak a few words as concluding remarks. So before handing over, let me quote Guru Nitya Chaitanya Yedi also. We have already heard Guru Muni directly. We discussed Nararaja Guru. In between Nararaja Guru and Guru Muni Narayana Prasad, there is Guru Nitya Chaitanya Yedi, the tradition of Narayana Gurukulam. So let me quote two sentences of Guru Nitya Chaitanya Yedi by way of conclusion of this webinar series, day 2. In the commentary of Atma-upadesha Shatakam, verse 48, Guru Nitya wrote that realization is to be lived here and now. Let us bring it to the marketplace. Let us bring it to the marketplace. That is, realization is not meant for as a mere intellectual exercise. It is to be lived. And marketplace symbolizes the bustle and noise of life. So unless the philosophy is not of use to navigate our life in such situations, probably there is no use of philosophy. So whatever heard about the wisdom, role of wisdom in attaining happiness, the meaning of life, and the lessons from Narada Guru's life as given in his autobiography, let us use it to live here and now. Let us use it as a guideline to navigate our life in the daily routines, the thick of life. Then only it will be meaningful. And that may not be possible within a day, or require a lot of meditations, what we call mananam in Sanskrit and Malayalam, and finally making it part of us, internalizing it, Nidhyasana. Only through that, philosophy can be brought to the marketplace. Let us hope for that. So with these few words, let me hand over the mic to Joyce, and may I request Guru Muni to speak a few words by way of concluding remarks.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, Guru, Kaka.
My first remark is about Selina Sadasivan's paper. It is not a remark, and rather an elucidation. When we say meaning of life, it can be viewed from two different points of view. One is from the ontological point of view, and the other from the axiological point of view. From the ontological point of view, you try to understand your own life's meaning content. What is the meaning content? Meaningful content in your own life, in each of us' life. Then you will find that that content itself has within it what we call the axiological element, that is Ananda. So knowing your own life properly makes life full of meaning. That means your own life becoming full of Ananda, or your own life becoming a flow, a continuous flow of Ananda. That itself is the meaning of life. On the other hand, of life, or life has some meaning that we aim at. Then that meaning content remains something other. That meaning of life remains something other, and that is not the perception of Vedanta. So in Vedantic perception, the axiological meaning of life and the ontological meaning of life become one. The aim of life, what we attain to, what we aim at attaining in life, and what we are really, both become one. What we attain is not something other. What we attain is what is within us itself. I don't know whether it is clear or not. And then about the autobiography of an absolutist of Nataraja Guru. If you read through the entire autobiography of Nataraja Guru, what you feel will be that he is leaving his own life to flow on with nature, and he remaining a sort of witness of it. And that is one remark. It is not a remark, it's a kind of explanation. And another point is, he mentioned, I don't know whether it is in the autobiography or not, he has mentioned many times, my life was a big failure, but that failure is to be written with capital F. I think that gives all the explanations. These are the only words I have to say about these papers. Now, Vijay can handle the matter.
Thank you. It was a fascinating session. Thank you to everyone who took part in the webinar. We hope to see you tomorrow for the final webinar in this series. So with great joy, we declare the session has come to an end. Thank you.